didn't call to ask if I still had a job. Not one of them. I found out on a Tuesday morning in March. My manager called me into the conference room at 8:47 a.m., and by 9:15 I was standing in the parking garage with a cardboard box, a severance packet, and the specific kind of silence that happens when a chapter of your life ends before you were ready. I sat in my car for 40 minutes. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there with the heater running and watched other people walk in and out of the building like it was a normal day, because for them, it was. Then I called my mom. She picked up on the third ring. I told her what happened, that the company had done a round of layoffs, that my entire department was cut, that I had done nothing wrong. There was a pause on her end, and then she said, "Well, were you hitting your numbers?" I was 31 years old and I had just lost my job, and my mother's first response was to ask if I had deserved it. I said, "Yes, Mom. I was hitting my numbers." She said, well, these things happen." That was the whole conversation. My name doesn't matter as much as what I was to this family. I was the one who handled things. That was my role, assigned somewhere around age 14 when my dad started forwarding me the utility bills because, as he put it, "You're good with computers." I was not particularly good with computers. I was just willing. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I was doing our family's taxes every spring using TurboTax and a spreadsheet I built myself. I was the one my older brother called when he got a speeding ticket and didn't know how to find a traffic attorney. I was the one my younger sister texted at midnight when her landlord sent her a lease renewal she didn't understand. I was the one my mom sent screenshots to whenever she got an email from her health insurance company, with a voice note that said, "Can you just explain this to me in English?" I did all of it, not because anyone asked me to specifically, not because there was a meeting where we all agreed this would be my job. It just happened the way these things happen in families, gradually and then completely, until one day you look up and realize you're the load-bearing wall that everyone else is leaning on and nobody can see. I had a good job for 5 years. Financial analyst at a mid-sized logistics company in Atlanta. Decent salary, good benefits, 401k match, the kind of stable employment that lets you exhale a little. I had my own apartment in Decatur, a used Subaru I'd paid off, and a small savings account I was slowly building toward a down payment. I also had, on any given week, 3 to 5 open tasks for various family members that had nothing to do with my life. My brother, who is 3 years older than me and works in sales, had a habit of spending money in the first 2 weeks of the month, and then calling me in week 3 asking if I could spot him until payday. I kept a running log in my phone's notes app. Over 4 years, I had lent him a little over $11,000. He had paid back maybe $1,800. My sister, who had just gotten engaged, had started treating me like a free wedding planner. She would send me vendor websites and ask me to just compare the packages. She would forward photographer contracts and ask me to flag anything weird. She sent me her venue's catering menu and asked me to build a spreadsheet comparing the per-plate costs for different headcount scenarios. My dad, retired, was dealing with a dispute about his property taxes. He had received letters from the county assessor's office that he'd ignored for several months, and by the time he thought to mention it to me, there was a hearing scheduled. I spent 2 evenings researching Georgia's property tax appeal process, drafted a letter for him, and helped him submit the paperwork online. My mom had a side business selling handmade candles on Etsy. She had asked me to help her set up the shop 3 years earlier. I had also been, ever since, the person who answered her questions about shipping labels, sales tax, and why her listings weren't getting views. I did all of this while working 50-hour weeks at my actual job. I want to be clear about something. I did not do these things out of love exactly. I mean, I love my family. But I did these things because I had been trained, over a long period of time, to believe that my value to this family was my usefulness, that if I stopped being useful, I would stop being seen. That being the one who handles things was the closest thing I had to belonging. I didn't understand that yet when I got laid off. The first week was the worst. I applied to 12 jobs. I updated my resume, rewrote my LinkedIn summary, reached out to former colleagues. I told myself this would resolve quickly because I was good at my job and the market for financial analysts in Atlanta was not dead. I also, in that same week, helped my sister compare florists because she had a consultation scheduled and didn't want to go in unprepared. I helped my dad draft an email to his HOA about a billing discrepancy. I answered 4 of my mom's Etsy questions. My brother called on day 6, not to ask how I was doing, to ask if I could cover his car insurance payment, $640, just until the end of the month. I said I would think about it. Then I transferred the money because I didn't know how to say no yet. The second week, I had my first interview. It went well. I came home feeling cautiously hopeful and made myself a decent dinner and thought, okay, this is manageable. Then my mom called. She said she'd heard about the interview through my sister and wanted to know if it was a step down from my old job, salary-wise. I told her I didn't know yet. They hadn't made an offer. She said, well, I hope you're not being too picky. You're not exactly in a position to be picky right now. I was in my kitchen, still in the blazer I'd worn to the interview, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. More like a door closing very slowly. The weeks stretched out. 6 weeks? 8 weeks. I was in the second round with 2 companies and a final round with a third. I was burning through my savings slower than I'd feared but faster than I'd hoped. I had stopped eating out. I had paused my gym membership. I had done the math on how long I could survive without income, and the number was not as comfortable as I needed it to be. And still, the requests kept coming. My sister texted me a 90-page venue contract and asked me to look it over before she signed. My dad called twice in 1 week about the property tax situation, which I had thought we'd resolved. My mom sent me a screenshot of a negative Etsy review and asked what she should say in response. My brother texted, hey, you think you could help me out again this month, just until. I put my phone face down on the coffee table and left it there for a while. That was the night I started writing things down. Not a journal exactly. More like a ledger. Date, request, time spent, what it cost me, what it cost them, which was nothing, which was always nothing. I had been unemployed for 9 weeks at that point. I had spent, by my estimate, somewhere between 12 and 15 hours doing things for my family members that had nothing to do with my job search. I had transferred a combined total of almost $2,000 to my brother across 2 separate requests. I had received, from any member of my family, 0 offers of financial help, 0 meals dropped off, 0 check-in calls where the point of the call was actually to ask how I was doing. Once, my mom called to see if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner. I said yes and showed up, and halfway through the meal she asked if I could take a look at her Etsy shop metrics while I was there because she had her laptop out anyway. I looked at the metrics. I didn't say anything about it. That was around week 10. The third month was when something in me finally went quiet. Not defeated quiet. Something else. The kind of quiet that happens when you've been standing in a noisy room for a long time, and you walk outside and you hear your own thoughts for the first time in years. I got a job offer in week 11. It was a good offer. Slightly better salary than my previous job, full benefits, hybrid schedule, a company I actually respected. I accepted it. I told my parents. My mom said, oh good, so you can get back to normal. My dad said, see, you were worried for nothing. Nobody said congratulations. Not one person in my family said that word to me. My brother texted an hour later asking if I could help him understand a collections notice he'd received. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, and then I put it in a drawer and cooked myself dinner and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving, and I ate alone at my kitchen table, and it was the most peaceful meal I'd had in months. That was the night I made a decision, not dramatically. I didn't write a letter or prepare a speech. I didn't plan a confrontation or rehearse what I would say. I just decided, quietly and completely, that I was going to stop. Stop being available. Stop answering requests within the hour. Stop being the person this family called when they needed something handled. Stop lending money I needed. Stop treating their emergencies as more important than my own stability. I wasn't angry. That's the part that surprised me. I thought I would be angry. But mostly, I just felt tired, and underneath the tired, very slowly, something that felt like relief. I started my new job on a Monday in June. The first week, I didn't respond to my brother's collections notice text. He sent a follow-up 3 days later. I texted back, "Hey, I'm in a new job and getting settled. You should call the collections agency directly. They're usually willing to set up a payment plan." He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I didn't hear from him again on the topic. My sister sent me the florist contract she'd already signed and said she needed me to review the cancellation policy because she was thinking about switching. I texted back, "I trust you made a good call. If you're really unsure, a local attorney can review it for a flat fee, usually around $150. She called me immediately. "Why would I pay someone when you can just look at it?" I said, "I'm pretty slammed with the new job. I really can't right now." There was a pause. Then, "Okay. Are you okay?" It was the first time she had asked me that in 4 months. "I'm getting there," I said, and I meant it. My dad called about a new letter from the county. I listened to him describe it, and then I said, "Dad, I think at this point you need a property tax attorney. It's gone beyond what I can help with remotely. I can Google a few names if you want." He sounded annoyed. He said he would figure it out. He did figure it out, hired someone who handled the whole thing in 3 weeks. It apparently cost him $400. He had never once thought to hire someone because I had always just done it. My mom's Etsy questions I stopped answering in real time. When she texted, I would wait a day or two and then send a link to a YouTube tutorial or an Etsy seller forum thread. She started figuring things out herself. She didn't love it, but she did it. I want to tell you what happened next, because this is the part I didn't expect. I thought when I stopped that my family would fall apart. I think some part of me had been counting on that. Not out of cruelty, but because I had believed for so long that I was the thing holding them together, that my absence would be felt immediately and obviously and they would understand, finally, what I'd been doing for them all along. That's not quite how it went. What happened was slower and quieter and in some ways more honest. My brother's credit took a hit. The collection situation he hadn't dealt with, I later found out there were 2 others he hadn't mentioned, ended up going further than he expected. He had to have some real conversations with himself about how he was managing money, not because I withheld anything from him. Because I was no longer there to absorb the consequences of his avoidance. My sister's wedding planning got harder without me running numbers and reviewing contracts. She hired a day of coordinator and complained about the cost. But the wedding happened. It was beautiful. I was in it. We danced at the reception and I held her hand during the vows and I was genuinely happy for her. I just wasn't her unpaid logistics manager anymore, and she was okay, and so was I. My dad's property issue got resolved by someone qualified to resolve it. He mentioned once, almost in passing, that the attorney had caught a clerical error that had been inflating his assessment for 3 years. He got a partial refund. He said, "Guess I should have done this a while ago." He did not say thank you to me. But he didn't blame me either. And in our family that sometimes has to be enough. My mom's Etsy shop is still running. She learned to read her own analytics. She started watching videos by other small shop owners. She joined a Facebook group for Etsy sellers and found, apparently, a whole community of people who helped each other. She texts me about it sometimes, not asking for help, just sharing. Someone in my group suggested I try seasonal bundles. "What do you think?" And I say, "That sounds like a great idea, Mom." And that's the whole conversation. There's one more thing I want to tell you. About 3 months after I started the new job, my dad called on a Sunday evening. I almost didn't pick up because I'd had a long week and I thought it was probably going to be something that needed handling. But I picked up. He said, "I just wanted to see how you're doing." I waited for the second part, the ask, the thing he actually needed. It didn't come. We talked for 22 minutes about nothing important, the Braves, a documentary he'd been watching, whether I'd tried that new barbecue place on Memorial Drive. When we hung up, I sat for a moment with the phone in my hand and felt something I didn't quite have a word for. Not forgiveness exactly, not closure, just the tentative, careful beginning of something that might eventually become a real relationship. My brother sent me a card in September. A physical card, bought from a store, with a stamp on it. Inside, he had written, "I know I've leaned on you too much. I'm working on it. Thank you for not giving up on me." He did not ask for anything. He did not mention money. I put it on my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like the state of Georgia. I don't know exactly what changed or why. Maybe they started to see in my absence how much had been invisible. Maybe they just grew up a little. Maybe I finally stopped making it so easy for them not to. What I know is this: I am not the person who handles things anymore. I am not the person this family calls when something needs to be managed, decoded, fixed, or funded. I am not the load-bearing wall. I am 31 years old. I have a job I'm good at. I have an apartment I chose for myself, a savings account that's growing again, and Saturday mornings where I do exactly what I want from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to sleep. I am still someone's daughter, still someone's sister, still part of this family. I just changed what that means. And for the first time in a very long time, when I open my phone in the morning, I feel nothing except whatever I actually feel. No dread, no obligation, no list of other people's problems waiting for me like homework I forgot to do. Just my own life. That turned out to be more than enough. I used to think that being needed was the same as being loved. For a long time, those two things felt identical to me. My brother needed me to cover his car insurance. My sister needed me to review her contracts. My dad needed me to decode his mail. My mom needed me to run her Etsy shop. And I showed up for all of it, every time, without being asked twice, because somewhere along the way I had decided that this was how I earned my place in the family. What I didn't understand then, and what took losing my job to finally see, is that need and love are not the same thing at all. People can need you completely and still not see you. They can rely on you for years and never once think to ask if you're okay. That's not love. That's convenience. And the difference matters more than I knew how to say. There's a kind of cause and effect that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a dramatic moment or a single turning point. It builds the way debt builds, quietly, invisibly, until one day the number is so large you can't look away from it. I had been absorbing consequences for my family for years. My brother's financial carelessness had consequences, and I absorbed them. My sister's disorganization had consequences, and I absorbed them. My dad's avoidance had consequences, and I absorbed them. When I stopped absorbing, the consequences had nowhere to go except back to the people who created them. That's not cruelty. That's just how reality works when you stop standing in front of it. What I had to find, in those 11 weeks of unemployment, was something I can only describe as clarity about my own worth. Not the worth I performed for my family, the competent one, the reliable one, the one who handles things, but the worth that exists underneath all that, the part of me that deserved a congratulations when I got a new job. The part that deserved a check-in call that wasn't a setup for a request. That kind of self-knowledge is hard to build when you've spent years outsourcing your value to other people's approval. I had to sit alone in my apartment, unemployed and uncertain, and find out whether I believed I mattered when I wasn't being useful to anyone. It turned out I did. That surprised me more than I expected. And I think that's the thing that actually changed my family, more than anything I said or didn't say. When I stopped performing capability and started simply being a person with boundaries and limits and a life of my own, something shifted. My brother had to reckon with his own finances. My sister had to make her own decisions. My dad had to hire an actual professional. My mom had to learn her own business. They were capable of all of it. They had just never needed to be, because I was always there. There's a version of strength that looks like endurance, carrying everything, never complaining, always available. I lived inside that version for a long time and I thought it was admirable. It wasn't. It was exhausting, and it was also, if I'm being honest, a way of avoiding the harder question: what do I actually want my life to look like? I know the answer now. It looks like Saturday mornings with nowhere to be. It looks like A savings account growing in the right direction. It looks like a phone that doesn't fill me with dread when it rings. It looks like being someone's daughter and sister without being their safety net, their accountant, their unpaid assistant. It looks, more than anything else, like mine.